of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, one of the selectmen is running a little late, so what I'm going to do with the agenda is we will jump to some of our standard stuff. In the new business, we'll work through the request to use town property and some appointment and wage authorization items. That way, some of the bigger discussion items we can make sure Greg's here for. So we'll start with request to use town property. Melissa Freeman is requesting to use town hall. January 11th for a family gathering. We've confirmed the calendar's all set, no problem.
Yep.
Do I have a motion?
I move that we request this use of town property for Melissa Freeman.
I second that motion. Any further discussion? Call for vote?
Aye.
Aye. We have Amanda Meady requesting to be appointed to the Council on Aging and the Age and Dementia Friendly Advisory Council?
Just got to be the Age and Dementia Friendly Advisory Council. We don't have an opening right now on the Council on Aging.
Okay, so Amanda Meady is requesting to be appointed to the Age and Dementia Friendly Advisory Committee. Do I have a motion?
I move that we appoint Amanda Meady to the Age and Dementia Friendly Advisory Committee.
Okay. I'll second that. Any further discussion? Call for vote?
Aye.
Aye. We have a wage authorization for Kaylee Hart submitted by the library director, Carol Witt. Is this just a step increase?
Yes.
Annual step increase goes from CL1 Step 1, Library Assistant CL1 Step 1 to Library Assistant CL1 Step 2. That's a $14.50 hour to a $15.46 an hour increase. Anybody curious? It's an increase of 6.6%. Do I have a motion?
Yep. I move that we accept this wage authorization for Kaylee Hart.
I second that. Any further discussion?
No.
Call for vote.
Aye.
Aye. Give this to you, Andrew, or to...
Yeah, you can give.
We have a wage authorization for Paula Bartkus, submitted by the chairman of the cemetery committee, Joel Cranston. This same thing? Step increase. This goes from a admin assistant cemetery class 3 step 1 to admin assistant cemetery class 3 step 2. Starts at $17.24 an hour. The raise brings it to $17.59 an hour, and that's a 2.03% increase. Do I have a motion?
I move that we accept this wage authorization for Joel Cranston.
It's actually for Paula Bartkus.
Oh, my mistake. Yeah, for Paula Barkas.
Okay. I second that motion. Is there any further discussion? Call for vote?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we got through that. Went too quickly, I couldn't drag it out enough. I guess we can start with any public comment. Is there anybody that has public comment today? Yes, Mary?
I was wondering, can you update me on anything that might be in the works as far as the basketball hoop in front of my home? I'd like to have it removed, or I'd like to have it, the placement away from my home. Very quickly, it was removed from the park for one house, which is 100 feet away, and another house, they didn't want it down there. About 50 feet away, well, it's 30 feet from my house, and it's bothersome in the summertime when the windows are open and the screen door. So maybe through the winter, I thought somebody could talk about it with the landlord, Christopher Higgins. There's 2 basketball hoops up there. I don't think that 7 houses needs 2 basketball hoops in one place in front of my home. And I got a lot of signatures from people at the dump, just random. And out of about 70, 75, there's only one that I quite understand, but the other said it should be moved. It's a portable hoop.
The question that you had signatures for was, is it fair to ask them to move the basketball hoop, correct? That was the
No.
questions?
Is it fair to me to have it placed in front of my home, a community hoop?
Okay, that's why I'm asking. I just want to make sure.
It was that. And
Okay.
then it was, did you move it, or
Gotcha.
mine is remove it, but I used the words, just move it.
Gotcha.
It's fair. They said that we didn't think it was fair. That was my survey. Is it fair? Would you like it in front of your house?
There is no update or progress that's been made yet.
Okay, thank you.
I don't want to say it's a dead issue. I'm just saying no progress has been made since the last time we talked about it.
Well, it's lying down on the ground now. The other one is up. There's one that's up and one is lying on the ground. Before
Okay.
they put it up for around Easter. Is there any talk or anybody talk to the landlord or to the people to just turn that hoop around so that it's used in their yard instead of in the road in front of my house?
I am going to make an effort, but I believe the board has agreed that this isn't something that actually is the board's business because it's a neighbor-to-neighbor relationship and there's no law in place right now that prevents them from doing what they're doing. And because of that, we have no jurisdiction to step in and actually force someone to do something. All we can do is try to talk to them and hope we can come to a reasonable agreement. So that's how I recall the board's position the last time, so I offered to try to do something myself. And I am just now trying to find some time in my life to help with that. So that's the best update we have, Mary. Like I said, it's not dead. I didn't give up on it. I just haven't been able to get to it. So go ahead, Mary.
Well, I'm being forced, the word forced. I'm being forced to listen to this and to hear this. We're all the people that don't live on my street and the people that are very happy that it's in front of my house, half of the street, because they don't want it in front of their house. They do not want it in front of their house. Why am I being forced to have to contend with this? It's not fair. They have 2 hoops up there. One is up all the seasons, and the children go over there and play. But they want to harass me. They have party time, and he has all his friends come over. He has the hoop. He has another hoop. He has 2 hoops. I think it's a little bit selfish and greedy for a 75-year-old person to have to put up with this. I want to enjoy my summer too. He has a hoop.
I understand what you're saying, but from an objective position from the government's role, he has the right to use his property, just like you have the right to use yours. There's no law saying he cannot use the public property that is the street. And because of that, we don't have enough support in town. I believe you presented a bylaw 3 times now through 3 different town meetings that have not passed to help with that. So it does not appear that the town wants the government involved in that type of neighbor-to-neighbor relationship. I am not saying you're right or wrong. I'm not trying to say is it fair or not. I'm just saying right now, the Board of Selectmen do not have any jurisdiction to do anything more than recognize and see what we can do to help with that relationship. But there's no power behind it.
It's been 4 years now. I think it's unreasonable time to.
To do
ask-
what?
To talk to the people, talk to the landlord,
I have talked to the landlord. I just have not talked to the people directly.
and the landlord thinks it's okay because he says he makes more money than me. And there's nothing he can do about it because they didn't sign the lease that says no basketball hoop on their property. Well, then leave the game on the property. If you put it on the curb of the edge of their property, it's 100% on the road, and it's disturbing.
I don't deny the fact that it's disturbing.
That's why I'm trying to get a bylaw for 4 years, twice a year, special town meetings and the town meetings. And I have to keep on getting signatures and bothering people in the stores and wherever I can get them. We need 100 signatures. I've gotten 100 signatures 3 times and 10 signatures, I think 4 times.
If you had 70 people show up at a town meeting and vote for you, you would have passed that bylaw.
I
Can you
feel-
get them to come to the meeting or just sign a petition and then not follow up with what they're saying?
These people are just going to the dump and just coming, they're just coming and going.
And I understand that. What I'm trying to say though is they're the ones you have to sell on it, not the 3 of us.
I'm just trying to find out, Matt, who is they? I don't know who they don't.
The people
want.
that live in town, that vote at town meeting.
On my street, I own my property. I
It's-
live there. I own it.
But you
I
don't
live
own the
there.
street and you don't own their property.
But they don't
So
own
we've
the
got to be
street.
careful on what rights you have to tell them what they can and can't do and vice versa. And I think that is the concern of the town members that don't support your bylaws. I don't want to speak for them, but I believe that's their concern. And so it makes it very difficult for us as members of the municipal government to have any teeth in the discussion to say the town says this is how we should act and you're not following that rule, so we were asking you to follow the rule, because there is no rule to support that.
That's exactly why the chief of police said that he can't do anything because there is no bylaw. And the police is saying, get a bylaw. I am trying for 4 years to get a bylaw.
I know that, I have watched it.
Then I
But to
I
get a
need
bylaw means you need the people in town to show up at town meeting and vote to support your bylaw.
They don't live there. It's run in.
They don't have to live there if they agree with you. So if they signed, if you had 70 people saying it's not fair,
That's right.
or it is fair for you to ask them to remove it, or it's not fair for them to impose upon you with the noise and the activity, do those 70 people believe it's strong enough to show up at a town meeting and actually vote to support that position? Or they're just gonna put their name on a petition, which is easy to do if there's no teeth behind the petition? And I'm not knocking them or you or the efforts you're putting in. I'm just saying, whatever process you've been trying to use has not accomplished the goal, and I don't have a good recommendation on how to do that. I don't know how to, other than from now until April, you're finding the 70 people or so that will show up at the meeting and committing to show up at the meeting with you to help pass a specific bylaw that you think is important. So what you need to do is more than the signatures, you need to say, will you support this if I put it to the floor for a vote? Will you show up and vote to support this?
I can't get people to even support anything that's going on in the town because they don't come. We have to sometimes wait just to have the people that you need to have, like a quorum. How can I possibly get somebody that's from Trafalgar Square? Well,
I can,
perhaps I would like at the meeting and have you back at, you call those Sam Lipson's,
I did vote for you the last time. I was the one person of the elected officials that stood up and voted for your bylaw the last time.
I appreciate that very much.
So you weren't
When it's
alone
true-
at the floor is all I'm suggesting.
But see, there's 2-to-1, when it's 2-to-1 and they don't understand the issue, then they're gonna go with the 2-to-1 of the selectmen, and then it's gonna fail, but.
Each
What-
selectman is trying to do what they believe their constituency wanted them to do.
So I'm
Or
trying to
when
find
it's a
a
town
better
vote, they might
decision.
just be providing their own personal opinion, because that's their right to vote.
Keep interrupting, but it seems as though what this constituency is, they don't live in my home. It's a portable home.
Laws are not made for individuals, though.
It's
They're made
for-
for the town.
It's made for Christopher Higgins, who refuses to have that moved.
There's no bylaw supporting him.
And that's why I keep on going and standing in front of the committee, and I'd like to have a secret ballot. It's not a secret ballot, it's a paper ballot next time, and I can't seem to get that paper ballot at the town meeting. You just have voices that are louder. They hear the voices that say, do you want yes or no? And they just say, uh-huh, yeah, yeah. And then you have the people know how loud that was in the back, in group, and they say, hey, and then, there you go, is the answer. And then at that point, I would like to have because I disagree with the way that's going with those voices, and I would like to have a secret ballot. I think it would be more fair.
A secret ballot can be requested at town meeting, and a vote to have the secret ballot can occur. But we cannot force it. The Board of Selectmen cannot force the moderator to go through a secret ballot process. Secret ballots can only occur on the floor when requested and voted on the floor, as far as I understand. There's no other method to say, this warrant will come forward and it will be voted as a secret ballot without it going to the floor and having people say, we agree, we want to go through the process of a written vote. If they don't want to go through it, then we can't force it. So again, it comes back to you getting enough people in town at a minimum to show up to get that 10% of the people at the meeting to vote for the secret ballot. And then after that, at least you get the secret ballot and you can go through the next process of, will the written vote be more encouraging than the vocal vote that the moderator makes a determination on, or the hand vote. So I would suggest at a minimum, if you can't get what you believe is the support of people to show up to vote for your bylaw, you might get enough people to show up to support the secret ballot initiative. Or you might be able to talk to people that regularly come and say, we understand, we recognize, this is an item we can do that with. I don't know. This is all a guess, because I have noticed that the tendency at our town meetings is, unless it's considered a very high level where a lot of people in town are interested, they don't want the secret ballot because they don't want to spend the extra 20 minutes it takes to go through the process. They want to get out of the meeting. That is the obstacle I would suggest that you have to find a way to get past. So I'm just trying to present that historically, unless it's one of those major ones where marijuana or certain zoning bylaws for solar and things like that were coming up where it was really heated on two sides, it's nearly impossible to get the secret ballot, except for maybe the school budget, because that's another issue that some people want to vote on, but they don't want the world to know they're voting because they either are or are not affiliated with the school system. So I'm just suggesting that in your case, because the case is being brought up with such a detail of the effect on an individual rather than it being considered a town-wide problem, it's really hard for you to get the support. I'm not saying it is or isn't abuse.
It is.
But They're legally allowed to abuse you this way.
Yes, they are. And the police can't do anything about it because it's not a bylaw, so I'm just asking.
What would happen if you lived across from a school? That's what I'm asking. It would be the same amount of noise. You just wouldn't have a ball bounce into your yard.
Some people like basketball, they like the noise. They like
That's
sports,
my
they like the
point.
noise.
So what I'm saying is you're trying to have a bylaw passed specific to a certain event occurring and how it affects you personally.
It would affect anybody personally, actually, if you heard that in my house.
Again, Mary Jane, I'm not trying to say other people wouldn't be affected the same way, but I am telling you that the people in town do not necessarily agree with what you're saying, or they would support the bylaw you presented. And I don't know how to help you change that narrative to help you win over people to vote for this bylaw.
Perhaps you could speak to the chief of police and, in his way of telling me, no, we can't help you because there's no bylaw, and telling you have to get a bylaw. And then you could perhaps not have a 1-2 against me, and it'll be the 3 selectmen that would agree, and then the audience would agree. That's what's happening.
Did you have something to say, Sam?
Isn't there just a basic nuisance law that the town of Barre can link up, link up to, so that this problem would be alleviated? 'Cause it
Are you
seems
saying
like-
is there an existing law?
Is there some sort of a nuisance,
Yes, there is.
basic nuisance law that she could be assisted by? I mean, what's
I would
happening?
have to look into it, but from my understanding, we don't have one that applies to her situation.
Yes.
What,
It's subjective,
what's
and
happening?
therefore, it's hard to use. The police would not use it because they wouldn't win it in court if they had to arrest someone for not following. Noise has to reach certain decibel levels. Nuisance also falls into like dust and debris and dirt. There's different things, but none of the nuisance bylaws or state laws that or even federal, I think some of them go way up when you get into EPA regs, but none of them seem to apply to this situation that the police feel like warrants enforcement, because they're not technically, from what I understand, based on my conversations with the chief, they have not failed to comply with that nuisance law that we have, because it's too subjective in how she feels she's being affected versus what they think they're doing. Yes, Mary Jane.
That law is also disorderly conduct, where you have drunkenness there and throwing the ball willy-nilly, whatever, hitting my car, bouncing off my car. And I say, please don't do that. When I say, please don't do that, he takes it 10 times, bounces it against my car wheels, the balances of the car. Then he goes to the other car, the other wheel, bang, 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 bang. That's drunkenness, and that's disorderly. You have 2 hoops up there anyway. They can use the hoop, 20, all those, they can use that. This is
Do you report it every time it occurs to the police?
Well, I get kind of tired of it, so no, I don't.
I would
Because
recommend
I
that you
use it.
do, for 2 reasons. If it's actually happening as often as you say to affect you in that manner, you have a record of it.
They know.
That's
They
considered.
get rid of it. It's,
They don't know if you don't call it every time. You have to call it to put it on the record. You can't just come to them and say it happened 10 times this month if you don't report it every time it happens.
these perpetrators are laughing, and they say, "God, call the police, go ahead, call the police, call the police." Because he says that the police are laughing at you, they're not gonna do anything. That's the group that I have down there, that has the basketball hoop in the street. Okay, so they didn't sign any paper saying no basketball hoop. Well, in that way, you can have a basketball hoop, but you can have it on your lawn, on your ground, not where cars go. It's a throughway. It's a through street.
Yes, sir.
Abuse, it's abuse.
Is there a way that that property can, is there a way that Mary Jane can buy a fence to fence off her property from the basketball hoop and then let them knock themselves out?
You would have to ask her.
Well, I'm asking.
I don't know her resources. Anybody can put a fence up, but you gotta be able to afford it, so I can't say whether she, is there a way, I'm
What if you
just.
put a fence up and they just can't go on your property?
The fence has to be put up on the perpetrator's property, not on my property. It's them who are playing the game. It's them who put up the portable hoop. It's them who have to contain this behavior, not me who has to change my living here.
May I interject, Selectman?
I'll let you have one more, go ahead.
I remember when I owned property abutting Crystal Park in Worcester. And I don't know if you know where that is.
I definitely do.
Okay.
South Main Street.
And I went before the various boards, and I needed, and I did, put up a fence on my property that kept people who use Crystal Park away from my property. And it worked. It kept, whatever they did on their own, on the park was the responsibility of the city. But they were not allowed to be on my property, and it worked. Sometimes good fences make good neighbors.
I've heard that.
And maybe there's a way that a fence can be put up, and maybe there's, maybe because of Mary Jane's senior age, it's no secret that Mary Jane is senior, that the town might be able to somehow assist her one way or another to put up a fence so that the balls can't be thrown at her car and thrown in her window or at her window, and both of those folks can live harmoniously. I mean, I don't know the method, but good fences make good neighbors.
Quick question
To whom?
to you.
Oh, okay.
Would you consider that a financially responsible use of public funds to provide a fence on one person's property to help one person with an issue?
Well, in answer to your question regarding good financial use of public funds.
Financially responsible, not good use.
Okay, financially responsible. If an elderly person who has been paying taxes in this town for I don't know how many years,
75.
for
With my parents' home.
75 years, is asking you to assist in removing a nuisance, I think it behooves the town to go the extra mile to try to alleviate this. 4 times or 3 times going before town meeting and not getting any support from the selectmen is not really very helpful. I mean, maybe she ought to hire an attorney and end up suing the town and end up having the town pay fees for litigation. I mean, I think we need to go, we collectively, a small town, need to go the extra mile to assist if what's happening, if what she says is happening, it happens, then I think that if the selectmen don't do anything about it, maybe they're culpable as well. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I think it behooves this is a small town. We ought to go out of our way for people who have tried to be a good neighbor. Now, she has not tried to be not a good neighbor.
I have a quick question for you now that you've gotten that far. Is being a good neighbor the responsibility of the government or of the neighbors?
The landlord.
The neighbors.
The
Property
landlord.
owners, neighbors. The landlord is not responsible for the tenant.
Oh,
The
yes.
tenant makes the actions they make. The landlord may have the ability to influence them, but the decision is the person that throws the ball at your car, not the landlord's fault. The fault came from the guy that grabbed the ball and threw it at the tires on your car. To say it's somebody else's fault is misplacing the issue. The issue is your neighbor, the person living at the property across the street. You and your neighbor are not able to find a way to get past this issue for whatever reason. I don't need to go there. We've talked about it for 4 years. That's why I'm saying I don't need to revisit it. It has been mentioned. But in regards to who should help her, are you saying it's the government's job or other town folk who support her position? And it sounds like you support her position. You're a member of the town. You might have the means to help her.
I have always raised my hand in support of the no nuisance issue.
I'm not denying that. You just asked somebody else to buy
And I
a
don't
fence
know-
for her
I
instead
don't
of
know-
offering to help yourself
I
find a
don't
fund to
know-
help her do it.
I don't know if we have a no nuisance clause in any of our rules and regulations.
Yes.
But if we do, then that should be related to what's happening, because what's happening is a nuisance. Whether it's the lessors, or whether it's the lessees. But if it's an evident nuisance that's been documented, then I believe we have an obligation as a town to somebody who's paid taxes for 75 years to go the extra mile.
One last thing, and then we really got to move on because we've been doing that. Just a second, Mary. The town has received the complaints. The police chief has received the complaints. The town hires the police chief to make sure that when complaints are brought to his desk, he investigates and determines whether something is breaking the law and whether he has action to take. He has done that job and determined, to date anyway, that there's nothing under his jurisdiction he can enforce. So, what is the town not doing right when it's been brought to our attention? It's been brought to the police chief's attention. He's reviewed the situation and he's responded with his understanding of what laws apply and what position she has based on the laws. So what he's come down to is, based on what's going on, there is no law the neighbor is breaking that he can find evidence for. And I'll leave it at that he can find evidence for, because I know that things can happen, but there's no evidence. So I'm not trying to say that nothing ever happens, Mary. I'm just saying nothing has been brought before him with enough evidence to say, I can do something with this. So it's not like the town has ignored her for 4 years.
But she needs to take photographs of the incidents and bring it to the attention of the selectmen.
She's done that.
And take the photographs and put it up on the screen so that everybody is aware of how
She can do that privately, but there's no way in the world she's gonna present something to us and we're gonna post it for her. You really wanna put us in the potential for a litigation. You want the town of Barre to set ourselves up for litigation because we're presenting one side of the story and potentially slander or libel could come from it because of the interpretation of pictures.
Would a fence make a difference? I'm asking you.
I don't have a clue if it would make a difference.
Yeah, but you've been there,
Yeah,
so would a fence make a difference?
it depends on how the neighbors respond. What if they put up a fence and then the neighbors get mad and they keep throwing the ball at the gate? She's still hearing it. It's up to her to decide if it would make a difference, because I don't know if it would make a difference to her. I'm not her. I don't know what bothers her, what offends her, nor do I know what type of actions the neighbors would take once a fence goes up. So you're asking something without enough knowledge for me to answer that.
Could you put up a fence?
I'm sorry, I'm just waiting
And
for
I
Greg
have to get a
anyway, otherwise it
helicopter
would
to
be
get my cars
over.
out, because I have 2 fences on both sides, and then it's the road. You're talking about the road is gonna have a fence. I won't be able to get my car out.
Unless you have a gate there.
Then it, impossible.
You gotta
Oh, my
also
house.
think about the type of fence. If it's just a 4-foot chain link fence, how much is that gonna change the noise she's hearing?
What I would just like to say is, the person that brought that second basketball hoop up there for the community, he doesn't want it in front of his house either. It's not in front of his house. He bought it, it is not in front of his house. It is on the property of Christopher Higgins on the opposite side. If you would just move it in front of his house along that side of the fence, it would be further enough away from me that would be possibly, would be as noisy. You move it 30 feet. He bought the fence, he accepted the fence to have be put in on the other tenants, which is right in front of my house. He wants the fence, if he wants, he doesn't want to hear it. Go figure.
Mary
that-
Jane, I
that
am not
doesn't
trying to
make
say
sense
that
to me.
you don't have a legitimate problem going on. All I'm trying to say is, you need more support from the members, the community.
They have the support, they have the support because
You
they
don't,
want it
or
in
they're
front of
not
the house.
voting any, if you had support, you would have passed a bylaw.
No, they don't want it in front of their house, so they are happy with all those letters that you got.
That does not change the fact you
False
don't have
accusations
support from the
against
town. If you had support from the town, the bylaw would pass, but you don't. And maybe it's just because they don't want it in front of their house.
Exactly, they're told
But the
that.
point is, that doesn't change the fact they don't support you.
They have 1,000 feet on top of the hill, they have a.
Doesn't matter.
High Plains recreation field with all those things that the town paid for, the taxpayers, I paid for, that recreation field, they can walk up there. We had to walk to school every single day up the same distance. This is not a big distance. And plus, they got the 2 hoops on Trafalgar Square. I'm not talking about one of the hoops that's in front of the backyard or off the street. I'm talking the one that is in front of my home.
Mary
Don't
Jane,
need that many hoops. My goodness.
I understand all of this. None of it changes the fact that what you're saying is not changing the minds of the people in the town. So you may need to figure out a different message to send if you want someone to help you.
That's why I'm here. I'm asking for a different way to do it. I'm asking for a different way to do it. Because
different
it's
way
not
to do
gonna
it?
be the people that will help me because they're happy with where it is in front of my home.
Find people that, no, you're asking a different way to do it. The best suggestion I have is you've got to find people in the community that will work with you, support you, and spread the word to other people in the community that will also support it, which means you may have to figure out what type of bylaw you're writing. You may have to figure out what type of group, community group could come in and help you, because they as a group have a further reach to help spread the word and get some support. So maybe the senior center can help you. And you talk to the right people and maybe they got an ear for it, they understand, and they spread the word. And before you know it, maybe by the end of the year, you have 30 people, 40 people that say, I'll show up and support this. But that's the only way, Mary Jane, it works, is you've got to get other people in town to want to go with you and support you. That's it. There's no other way. And doing it here isn't working.
I'm asking for the selectmen's support in helping me perhaps write a bylaw without the words that I'm using. You're saying I'm using the wrong words, and then I can't have a bylaw. Well, when you ask, one of the bylaws that I wrote, just reposition the hoop so that the game is 100% on their property, not on the road. And then I had a whole bunch of papers that were at the last meeting saying that, I mean, I couldn't believe my ears. when she was saying, I said that I wanted it in the non-A park, I said it in the area of non-A park, and that threw the whole thing down because of the misrepresentation of what I wrote in the bylaw. I says, read the bylaw, it doesn't say in the non-A park, it says near it. It was on Pine Tree Terrace. And everybody knew where that was, so I used it as a,
Sam, this is the very last thing said on this topic tonight. We gotta move on to the next agenda.
Is there a way for the selectmen to reach out to the planning board or commission and provide the planning board with some of the issues that you've been discussing? And perhaps the planning board can assist Mary Jane with some of the wording which might facilitate her need. Because clearly, she's not an attorney. Clearly, she's a senior person, and maybe she doesn't know the words or the right words or the way to put the words together to try to get this to be an understanding bylaw. And maybe the planning board is the organization that might be able to assist. And maybe the selectmen need to contact the planning board and charge them with trying to assist in resolving this problem. I think that's the greatest, not because I came up with it, I think that's a great idea. The government doesn't have to be involved. You can just ask.
That's the same thing.
You can ask the planning board if they can assist a citizen regarding the difficulty that a citizen is having. And maybe they might come up with a plan so that we don't have to spend 20 minutes every third or fourth month discussing the same thing.
I would suggest this in response to that. One, the planning board it wouldn't be in their jurisdiction to write a general bylaw regarding this type of, it's not a zoning bylaw. So I don't think they would entertain the idea of helping someone write a bylaw that doesn't fall under their jurisdiction.
I don't know what's the jurisdiction of the planning board. I just came.
Well, no, you asked, and
Yeah,
I'm
right.
telling you, that's why I don't
Right,
think.
but I don't know what.
And the planning board still represents the government, so why did you make the statement of,
I
and
don't-
it's not the government?
I don't know who has, a citizen is the damaged party in a town. So I don't know within the town who can assist a citizen who's not educated in the legally educated to be able to compose a bylaw. Now, I don't know how one goes about doing that, and maybe, we know it's not the conservation, we know it's not the Board of Health, maybe it is the planning board, I don't know. Or maybe it's a component of both. But, you know, if somebody comes in 4 years and is damaged for 4 years, what do you want? You want somebody to get hurt? And then you'll say, oh, we should pay attention. I'm just giving you alternatives. That's all. Something to think about. I mean, we have Selectman Clark. I haven't heard a peep out of him in regard to this. Maybe he needs to weigh in. Or we have Selectman O'Sullivan, who came a little tardy because he's studying what we have to discuss tonight, which is appropriate. But Selectman Clark hasn't said anything. You've spoken about this in its entirety, and maybe some other people, maybe the town administrator needs to put in his 2 cents so we can get this resolved. Because there is a damaged party here. She happens to be a senior person.
You're repeating yourself?
I don't
You
mind
got
repeating
anything?
myself.
I mind it, I've gotta move to the next agenda, so
I heard
please.
you repeat yourself many times, Selectman Urban. So
And I
don't-
have that right.
So don't chastise me for repeating myself.
Why?
I hear you repeat yourself. Am I allowed to chastise you for talking on and on and on about nonsensical things? Why?
Yeah, you are allowed to. If I give you the floor, you can do it. You just did.
I don't think you get it. I'm trying to help resolve this, and maybe I'm asking for some input from Selectman Clark.
That's the first time you asked. That is the first time you asked.
Fine, I've asked for it. Okay. Can
Would
we
you
get
like
some
to?
input?
Would you like to respond to that?
I feel like Chairman Urban has gone over this exhaustively today, and we've talked about this for the entirety that I've been sitting in this chair over the last few months. And I have no additional comments. I feel like Chairman Urban has really gone above and beyond what he needs to do to resolve this. And he's being extraordinarily patient in letting it continue, because I feel like we would like, from my point of view, I would like to see this resolved. I don't see how it's going to be resolved from this room.
We have nothing more, Mary, right now to add to this. We're gonna take everything that was presented, take it under advisement, unless Greg, do you have anything you wanna add to this at the very end of it?
Certainly not.
Do you have anything more you'd like to add to it?
No more to add.
Then I would recommend that we take this under advisement.
I want a courtesy and respect bylaw. I need help with writing a courtesy and respect bylaw. And to,
The town is full of lawyers. There are many people that could help you if they agree with you. I happen to know that a Mr. Lipsome knows at least more than one lawyer. He might be able to assist you if he so chose to provide his resources to assist you. There are many people in town that can assist you in this.
they're not coming forward to say anything at the town meeting.
Then they don't support you.
And the select board doesn't either because of the votes that go to, against me and one.
Because I represent the town. This is not, I got voted in, now it's whatever Matt Urban wants. I'm representing the town in how I am trying to fulfill this office. The town has given me no inclination that they support a bylaw to address an issue happening on one street between two neighbors. It has not been shown to occur anywhere else in town.
If it was their mother, or their mother-in-law, or their wife, or a sick baby, or something else.
Then they would show up at town meeting and vote to support your bylaw. That's all I'm trying to say.
Thank you for your time, and happy holidays. And if you can think of something else that can help me before the basketball hoop goes up again. The second basketball hoop on Trafalgar Square, there's one in the backyard. We just want to get rid of the community one in the front yard of the road, too close to me, or put it to the man that owns it and his side of the yard. That would even help a lot, half. Put it, he brought it, put it on that side where it wouldn't be affecting me so much. But thank you for your time. I'm gonna go home now.
All right. And despite the fact that this has not been the easiest of conversations, I do also hope you have a happy holiday.
Well,
And-
thank you all
Likewise.
Have a good
for
evening.
your time. Bye.
Any further public comment? Okay. I would like to start with, we have the privilege of members of the Hubbardston Board of Selectmen, a discussion regarding the school budget. Would you gentlemen like to come on up and we can start the conversation and see where it goes?
Sounds good. How's it going? See you again.
Great result.
Yeah, good. Hey, Matt, see you again. You too.
I'm Chuck Reed, actually, Finance Committee.
Finance committee.
Oh, thank you, Chuck.
Nice to meet you.
How you doing, Dan?
Tilly, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Chuck.
Nice to meet you.
Hi. Dan.
Sorry, and just for the record, I did misstate. We have a representative of the Finance Committee and a representative of the Board of Selectmen from Hubbardston. Thank you, Chuck.
Well, thanks for giving us some time tonight. You guys are all gonna be on my filibustering team, by the way, too, if there ever is one that is needed in the area. So, just a quick little history of sort of why we're here, why we asked for some time. So, I guess I'll first off preface that Hubbardston was the unlucky town this year based on assessments, so that was sort of, I think, why we wanted to sort of, restart a conversation that's been had for pretty much many decades around here. But anyway, so here's just sort of the quick little snapshot, quick little plan. So on October 28th, Chuck was not there at this one, but I went to and met, had some time on the OPEB select board. So I asked for some time, same sort of thing. I had asked Ryan McLean, our town administrator, to reach out to the local boards to just have a little time to sort of talk about things. And met with him for half an hour, sort of went over a few things that we'll talk about tonight, and basically said, from that point on, gonna try to do the same thing, get on some agendas, and just sort of continue the conversation. This is relative to school budgeting and funding and that sort of thing. Not reinventing the wheel, just a discussion that's easier to have face to face than in any other way. Steve LeBar, the chair at OCAM, wanted to be here tonight because he asked me to let him know when we were going to be sort of bringing the party along to the next towns, but he's got his board meeting tonight too, so sent me an email with some thoughts and whatnot, but couldn't make it tonight as well. But then I found out Chuck was coming, which is great to have some additional support. So what happened to, just a quick little history, because we've sort of all been through it probably at some point. This is my 7th year on the board. Based on the fact that recently, or the year before, Hubbardston had done their assessment, town assessment for properties and whatnot. And it just so happens that the economy happens to be what it was at the time the assessments were done. They all went up. And because it was our year, we all do sort of our own 3 or 5 year rolling assessments. Because that was the case, we were more affluent town at the time, and therefore our percentages for what we were supposed to contribute based on all the formulas that none of us fully understand or support. I'm not speaking for you, but overall, you know what I mean. Some of this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it just so happened that it became our year. So our first number that came at us was 8.6%. Was voted down at town meeting because the select board and the finance committee said we can't afford more than 5, which was even high. So it went back to all the towns because a couple of others also voted it down, and it went back to the school committee who made some cuts, which weren't really cuts. They were just a couple of realized savings based on insurance and a few other things that we have documentation on, and we were presented with an additional 6.3%, which was a reduction, still more than we could afford, and we had to do, some gymnastics to sort of present it to the town. And again, came to special town meeting for Hubbardston, and we voted it down again. Similar thing where the finance committee and select board said, okay, this is what the 6.3% versus 5 is going to mean for our town. We wouldn't have this, we wouldn't have this, this, and this. And it's not by any means ringing alarm bell. It's not purposely trying to provide or create untrue or misleading rhetoric. None of that was the point of any of this. It was just this is what we want to do from a overall attempt to plan for the future standpoint. From capital programs, not elaborate ones, but capital programs and all the sort of normal things we'd like to do to have a properly functioning town in our minds, okay? So anyway, so then it went to a couple of other town meeting votes again. The school decided to reduce it slightly because of some additional, not cuts again, but realized savings. Not biting from E&D or any of the other, that's the excess and deficiency account that the town, that the school has, that part of their savings, I guess, that they can spend on things like this, but some additional reductions, and brought it down to 6.1%. We again voted it down, but the other towns too, and I think it was Hardwick, New Braintree, said that they supported the final round that was, and since it's 4 out of 5 towns need to do it, didn't matter what we said, and we owed what we owed. So at that point, we had to have a third or whatever it was, special town meeting to actually ratify that, and we were just calling loved ones to come down to make that quorum the third time, that sort of thing. But it all, you know, worked out, and we've sort of figured it out. I mean, we've all sort of been there. And so I guess that sort of sets the table. So that sets the tables for the year that we just went through as far as a budgeting standpoint. And nothing moving forward, and Chuck and I talked about this a little bit before, and he was right to sort of to bring it up, is none of this is being done to try to get in front of the school district, or to be secret about it. Ellie's right there. So, you know, or our own school committee members, which are an important part of this process too. What we're trying to do, and after some research, both done by us and done by Steve at the town of Ocam, one of the first thoughts that we thought was like, okay, can we start aligning assessments in a certain way so that doesn't become so difficult every 4th year for some town? Unfortunately, that doesn't really work.
State won't allow it?
Well, no, it doesn't. If we align them, then it's gonna be bad for everyone all at once. You know, there's some additional data I can provide to you guys, but overall, it doesn't really work. It almost gets worse if we align them, because then the school district, that 1 year where everybody's comes in, it depends on the economy. If the economy's going great, it's fine, but if 10 years from now, 15 years ago, when we're long gone, goes into a spot where it inevitably will be again, it could be really damaging to the district if everything's on the same path as far as an assessment alignment, because everyone would have the same low assessments and not have the responsibility to contribute that much to the district, if that makes sense.
It doesn't.
Okay.
Not on a formula-based funding system. Because what it means is every town is always on the same playing field. Nobody gets that 1 year bump that the other 4 towns don't have to deal with.
Which
And
is
because
why,
of the voting,
Yep,
that one town is always the loner in the vote.
yep,
So everybody ending at the same time means the ratio of each town doesn't change based on their town valuation.
correct. So,
And so it takes that out of the formula as why is this town unable to do it this year? Because they got the random 8% increase versus everybody else got 2%.
and that would, in a perfect world, I couldn't agree more. Good, you know, assessment of what I just said there. The problem is our 5 towns do not distribute things evenly in the first place. That's only the case if the 5 towns actually provide what they're supposed to owe, if things were sort of done linearly between them all. But based on how the formula is and how it doesn't actually do that, so there are certain towns that don't want to change things because they have things a little bit better off than they would in a very, very straightforward linear situation. So that's why it wouldn't be as perfect. And again, that's sort of why I prefaced with, I'm not gonna be able to explain it with all the numbers without some additional backup data. But I guess, and I'm not saying trust me that I'm right, but overall, that was the first thing we looked at, is should we align these things? Would there be support for it? And that was one of the first things I brought to OCAM, which they said, yeah. And, you know, but as we've looked into a little bit further, it doesn't feel like, it's not door closed, but it doesn't feel like that's the end all, or that's gonna necessarily provide all of our savings. So what we'd like to do, so, you know, I'm in business, right, I'm a construction company, and so many of us have our own sort of businesses that we work at. And, you know, and this isn't, you know, to sort of necessarily say that these are all the same, but, you know, an important piece that we think is missing from you know, the school district way of starting off their process is having any information from the towns. I feel as though, and we sort of feel as though, that it's sort of 5 individual vacuums that you know, provide that do our own financial forecasts. We're doing one right now, you know. And we, to the party that we are gonna be contributing 60% of our total revenues to, doesn't have any idea what we can afford. And I'm not saying they wanna know, so that's a little bit separate part of the conversation here. But there are other regional school districts that we've looked into that provide early information. And this is not lowball, this is collaborative. This is not lowball by any means. And I know,
You're trying to create enough time to properly plan.
no question about it. And so, right. And so enough time to properly plan on all sides. And so what, you know, I think that's overall, although there are many pieces to this, we were basically wondering whether or not there was energy throughout the district to eventually get to a point where we all provide some information early on to the school committee, to the subcommittee that would be specific to sort of beginning off the process to whether they, you know, and again, whether year 1, year 2, year 3, they take that information into account, I don't know. They're elected officials, they're gonna do what they're gonna do. But it's a process that's never been done until it's too late. And so, there's just a certain, I've been doing it 7 years, I think I already said that, there's just a certain inevitability of the process that just, and granted, we happen to be part of getting bit by it this year. But whether or not the assessment years are aligned or not, we at least know when ours would be coming up, or yours would be coming up, or all that sort of thing. And that would be factored into our own 3- and 5-year financial forecast, so that we would know that coming up into those years, look, this is what's the district can sort of most appropriately afford. So, as far as you know, asking a couple questions, I guess that would be sort of what I want to do next as well. And it just for our information and for sort of our, you know, our own sort of way moving forward with our own school committee. How do you guys, if at all, we're not great with it, how early on with your own school committee members do they sort of find out about how town finances are going and whether or not they're reporting to the actual full committee on how the town of Barre is doing on an annual basis? We, as I just say it again, we don't really do well with that and haven't since I've been there in the past. Is that something you guys are, is that part of your process, or is your process sort of like ours, even though I know you don't know ours, but is it more, this is what we've got, this is the pot of money, this is how much free cash we think we're getting, blah, 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 and then we sort of go from there? I mean, just generally.
From my perspective,
Yeah.
Let's ask
there's
the guy who
very
does it.
little early discussions about the 2 separate budgets. So in other words, outside of what might happen below the Board of Selectmen, in other words, between the town administrator and a quick question that might come from the schools back and forth that way, there's no formal school committee members coming to us until we're rather deep into the budgeting process, and they're kind of just presenting their budget, and they usually do it to the finance committee.
Yep.
And then they come to us. If we push back, then they come to us to explain it. So that's my history. I mean, there's not a lot of, so how's your year looking? How's your budget looking? What should we, so that they can maybe even take all 5 towns, and if all 5 towns say this isn't the best year, do they take that into consideration or not? Secondly, I really don't know, from my understanding, every time you talk to them, it's like, most of the time the answer is we don't have a choice. Everything's mandated, we have no money for all of it, it has to happen. Or we're gonna take out every little potential extra we put into the budget that isn't mandated. And that's usually the start of the conversation. And then like you said, then they find where they over budgeted certain line items, certain insurance or something, it comes down a little. Different things when you push back far enough, and I'm not knocking them. Everybody needs to put in a little room in their budget for the unforeseen, so I'm not necessarily saying that was a bad decision on their part. But I don't recall a lot of preamble going into the budget season between the district and the town of Barre. At least on the Board of Selectmen side. There might be a little bit more involved with the finance committee, but I didn't really get involved last year a lot with the finance committee and the school committee stuff.
Yep.
So I don't want to say that it has or hasn't improved from my more involved years. Do you?
I think we better have to ask Andrew that, because he'd know better what.
Well, I mean, from the Board of Selectmen, not from the town administrator's office.
The board, we've had no formal meetings with either the school committee, or as far as I know, the school committee with the finance committee. Formally, it is as far as asking where we stand financially. My perception of this was sort of reinforced when the school committee was here presenting to us with a more detailed budget. And one of the members had commented, well, our job isn't to worry about the town, our job is to do the best we can for the school. But that's not only their job. To me, the school committee is the liaison between the school in the town, and they want to do the best they can for the school, when taking their town's best interests at heart as well, and they don't seem to do that. They don't see themselves as a dual role as taking care of the school or watching out for the town. They just see as doing for the school. And I think that attitude and that atmosphere for the school committee is what needs to change. They need to have some fiduciary responsibility to the towns they come from.
And that's what we're getting to.
And so I see where you're going. I'm saying that's definitely lacking, and unless Andrew has seen any different. But
I mean, I had some conversations with the superintendent and the business manager, basically just kind of one-on-one conversations, hasn't really involved the finance committee or the board of selectmen. Basically, I think the general frustration has been that at the end of the day, when the school builds the budget, the end number comes down to, and here's what the town is paying at the end. It's not a matter of starting with, here's what we know the town can afford, and we've built from
budgets
there.
work the other way. Budget is, here's the money you have, and do what you can with it, not tell us how much we have to pay
And
you.
so we had a fracture
And
last
that's
year,
the problem.
unfortunately. You know, it's because of how, you know, far our numbers were out from what our town could afford from providing, you know, basic local services across the board. You know, I ended up having a meeting with, it was me as chair of the select board, with the chair of the finance committee, the town administrator, and some school committee members way too late. And so it caused, you know, because again, and I've been part of this long enough to know, they've been staring at their own numbers for a long time, knowing how hard they're doing to try to drive the number down. And if the answer can never be good enough from a municipal standpoint at that time, there's gonna just be that inevitability of it, which was just unfortunate and unnecessary as far as, you know, whether or not you can start the process much earlier to get to a point where, hey, if it happens, at least you've known you've done everything you could along the way, versus just two different parties who live in the same town, should be working overall for the same thing. And that's just what happened to us. And there's still some strained relationships going on, which is unfortunate because that makes this process even harder. So that's what we're trying to fix as well, is to try to just get in there early. And I realize that it's gonna take some work too. And what I mean by work is some select board and finance committee involvement in the school committee sort of process. And, you know, we're all coming to these meetings whenever we can, and providing all the support we can for our towns, but I know that there's a lot of work to it, and I think we're up for it at this point. So what I, you know, again, anybody interject at any time, but what I'd like to do, if you know, again, we're still early, and we're still just wanted to sort of meet the towns and sort of find out everybody's process and sort of take the temperature of things. But ultimately, you know, what we'd like to do from Hubbardston's standpoint, again, this is whether or not we have sort of the okay from you guys to sort of proceed as the lead is not the right, but basically just being the sort of at the front of the process so that we don't have 5 different voices talking all at once. So what we'd like to do is sort of go to all the towns, like we did from OCAM already, and to you guys, and sort of come up with like a draft sort of report. And what that report would be some recommendations based on all of our visits on what we think, whether or not it's this year or next year or whatever that would be, and whether that includes assessments, when we meet with our own school committees and members, when we all collectively meet to provide our initial financial forecast to go ahead with it, is to provide some recommendations based on all of that for all the different boards to take a look at and comment on and say, hey, we think this is a good idea, or we think this should be changed. Then we ultimately get to a point where we have something that we can collectively go to the school with as a full 5-town district to say, hey, moving forward, this is the way we'd like to try things. And you know, who knows? You know, I don't even know what that's gonna look like right now, but that is sort of the ultimate goal, without any sort of full knowledge of what it's gonna look like, is to just to have some sort of a little bit of a new way to start the process off, to get us in early, instead of get us in after most, to be honest, of the decisions have already been made. Because
It's
that's
a nice
what
thought,
happens.
and whether or not the school committee will see. They seemed rigid before of their tasks and what they want to do and how they do it.
Right.
But I'm hoping that after last year with the difficulty, maybe they will be open to a new process, which would ease their troubles as much as ours. It's a good idea.
But I think ultimately it will save us time, save us work, because right now the way it works is we put our budget together based on based on history, but also what we think the town needs, based on what the money's coming in. We say, divide it up, you people do the same thing in your town, according to what we think what the number should be. Well, then, if we get a bill, and I know with the school, they're relying heavily on what they get back from the state also. So they can't come up with exact numbers. But they give us a bill, and then all of a sudden, it's like in your house, you get a credit card bill you didn't expect. Now all you suddenly have to take from all these other different areas in order to pay that bill. And so then we have to redo everything that we have already done.
So the one time in the period that I've been a part of the select board, and maybe a year or two before that when I was municipally involved in other stuff over, I guess, call it 8 or 9 years total. The one time where I actually saw where this collaboration had begun was when the task force was first started. So that was the school consolidation closing task force that then turned into the QEMP. So that was probably 4.5 years ago. But that was, and I don't know if you guys were, any of you guys, I know you guys had a little bit of turnover on the board here. But basically what happened in that process is we were trying to do a 5-year financial forecast, kept asking the school for it. They said, sorry, we can't, we'd love to, we can't. And we said, forget it. And we went to all 5 towns and said, we need to ask for this. And so all 5 select boards signed a letter that said, provide us with a 5-year. And again, we have no necessarily real strength in jurisdiction, but it was just collective sort of requests.
Just loud enough.
Unless we rewrite the regional district agreement.
Correct.
we
But
don't
at
have
that
any
point,
force.
what they did was we said, we can't, however, let's all get together and start this task force thing. Because the only thing they could think of at the time, and again, I get that how difficult their job is too. But the only thing they could think of at the time was, look, we may have to close some schools, so we gotta talk about it. And so that's how that group all started, and I was on that task force, and 5 towns had different select board, finance committee, and at-large members that were all together, and we were, we didn't come up with any sort of grand plans, but we ended up getting a couple $100,000 in grants to do it, and we've got an economic development coordinator now that's shared between the towns. Something came effectively out of it, and it was the one time that I've seen that all 5 towns got together to do something, and something good came out of it. So that was sort of the idea to try that again, and whatever capacity we can sort of get there is from a collective goal where we all don't have the same goal, but it's meaning specifically the same goal, but it's all generally the same. So I guess that's sort of overall what we're hoping to do.
I got 2 questions out of that. One is starting with the whole task force that developed into QEMP, and then even out of that, there was, what built out of that was the potential of having kind of a regional representation meeting. So like quarterly meetings where each town would send a representative,
Yep.
and we could have these quarterly things, whether it was about just other regional agreements or the school district, but we could kind of work together like that.
Shared services.
Shared services. That was part of the QEMP, but I do know that talking to some of the selectmen in New Braintree, as well as maybe even you, Dan, at one point, we all agreed that that makes sense.
Yep. And Steve Hubbardston, in the email that he sent me from OCAM, just to say, for tonight, said, talk about that.
So when I take that, and then the next question, school budgeting, has it already hit the subcommittee agenda to start the budgeting?
Yep.
Okay. If we were to try to do the preliminary discussion, what time of year or what month in the year do you believe the town should get together to then present that concept or that number to the district?
September, October.
Okay.
Which is what, my first meeting was October 28th. Again, this was sort of after the last season, we had all these different
Yeah.
special town meetings and stuff. So that's why I said maybe not this year, but sort of moving forward.
And so taking those two together, I think that's the basis on how we should look at these quarterly meeting and when to schedule them. We're already late for this concept to have a preliminary number.
Yep.
But if we were to do that in September,
Yep.
January would be the next time. Do we want to reach out to see if the towns want to meet in January? Choose a random Thursday when not every town's at their Monday night meeting or whatever.
Yeah. Ours is right now too, so I'm here.
Well, but that's what I mean, because apparently you were saying OPEB similar. They have their meeting on Monday.
Yeah.
It seems all boards of selectmen do Monday nights.
We had,
I
a
don't know.
we had a basketball hoop too. I didn't want to be there, so it's fine.
So, my suggestion is, and if you're okay with it, it could be your town, it could be our town. But
Yep.
for now, because it's at our meeting and Andrew's here and it's easy for me to say, hey, Andrew, can we look to try to determine a date in January to do one of those 5-town meetings? And now, any town can send a representative from any board they want.
Yep.
I would suggest at least a Board of Selectmen or Select Board representative for this January meeting and a Finance Committee meeting. I think this first meeting would be best to focus on budgets, school budgets,
Agreed.
local town things. 3 months from that, maybe we get into more of the regional agreements where we got like the building inspector for some of our towns, we get some of the other things going on between the towns.
Yep.
But then we start getting back into, okay, well, that's January, February, March, April, May, June, July. That's my thought. Should we start trying to set that schedule and set the first meeting for January to have that first discussion and actually start to make what we've talked about for a year now
Yep.
a reality? Because I think it can roll right into what you're saying, and once those meetings become habit, then the agenda becomes habit, and then when we get to September, are we just doing our own discussion now to say what would we present to the schools? When September comes,
Yeah.
we ask the school committee to come to our meeting, and we do a big meeting with each town having at least one of their school committee reps, Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, and as a group, we talk about it. And that way the school committee knows what we're planning on doing each year, whether it's in the district agreement or not.
Yep.
The rest of the towns are gonna do it. And the district can decide to do it, or they can let it blow up to the point that every town says we're gonna rewrite the agreement, which I understand that the district is not necessarily liking the idea of opening the agreement to amendment.
And we have to be prepared to be patient, because there are gonna be people who roll their eyes, because, think that nothing can ever get done. And because they've been a part of it a long time, or whatever else, and I don't think that's a good reason not to try.
I agree with you.
So I think that's a good idea, and, part of the QEMP discussions and what you're just talking about there, I don't remember who said it, but there's no better sort of, way to sort of, to make sure that something doesn't slip through the cracks, such as a shared,
Purchasing agreement.
right, or whatever, I was trying to think about, I'm in construction, I couldn't think of a single construction piece. But you know what I mean, like, oh yeah, we were gonna buy one too, oh yeah, we were gonna, that's the sort of thing that.
Like the bucket truck.
Correct, the bucket truck, my God.
Yes.
So something to that effect, where those are the sorts of environments that aren't every month. Then maybe it's every 4 months or every 6, whatever, some sort of frequency where it makes sense, where it's not oversaturation, where it makes things impossible, or just into even a bitch session that these things can turn into as well. So that's unavoidable.
If you don't put it down on the calendar, it just keeps getting moved up. So-
And that's why I was kind of, you had a comment, Tom?
Yeah, question. Have you seen any examples of this done in other regional school districts? Any good models to look at to see, what worked, what didn't work?
Yeah, so-
Anyone we could talk to?
Yeah, I don't know about talk to, but maybe talk to, yeah. But I do know that it's only 2 towns, but it is regional. Groton Dunstable does this sort of thing. So Groton Dunstable does where they have early collaboration like this, where the towns, again, I'm not trying to say it's 100% like Quabbin, but there is precedent for it, and there is success in providing this sort of process, and theirs is probably easier than ours, but still, That's one where, you know, it's early on where the towns are talking about what they can't afford or what their expected amount to afford. Whether or not, and whether or not there are 4 or 5 times in that conversation the school says, well, we still need to know what state aid's gonna be, that's fine. Those conversations can still be had, you know, and that statements can still be made during the process, but at least there's another sort of chip on the table to add to the conversation, which is really all we're trying to get to. So, yeah, I mean, beyond that known, but I know that there's some.
There is another, I know I read about a regional school system this spring, I think somewhere down in the South Shore. I'll see if I can dig up the article and I'll forward it to you.
Great.
It's similar to.
You
Did
can
talk
send
to
that?
New, yeah, I did talk to New Braintree last week. They are working on coordinating a 5-town meeting within the next few weeks, so they didn't give me any dates.
Tell them
but
we're
they said
looking for
it's-
something in January. Hubbardston and Barre both said that sounds like an idea.
Yeah, and then,
I
I mean,
don't
really.
want to speak for you, I just meant it's an
Thursday, on a
idea.
Thursday.
Given the fact that we
Thursday.
just set the tax rate, we have another month until the House releases its budget. I mean, really, anytime within the next month is prime time to kind of present that because you have a more realistic view of what your next financial projection is going to be.
We just sent our, we sort of ratified ours last week and signing it tonight, so same for us.
Yeah, so I mean,
That's-
it's like within that period between the House releasing its budget and knowing, you know, what your actual tax rate is, that's that real prime
Yeah,
time
that's
to
one thing I
talk with the
thought,
school.
talking about this in September, October seems awfully early. We're just a few months out after our annual budget, and we don't have these things. I think it's premature.
I think you can
It's premature
historically
that early.
look and see what the state comes in.
But we don't
the
know
state-
what the Promise Act is going to do to the.
It
10%
doesn't matter.
rate,
You
so.
can still look at history and see how often what is that variation?
Mhm.
And in the last 3 years, it has not been significantly different.
It's
Because
true.
they realize eventually we will rate the state's government if they keep doing this to us. I think they realize they can't keep playing the game of, well, we haven't fixed the formula yet, but we're also not gonna give the money that we've mandated you have to do certain programs, and we haven't ever fixed the formula for those programs. I think they realize that, yeah, and it will vary, don't get me wrong. But if we don't do this and actually start at the preliminary, September-ish, and then get to the next step, we're not actually creating a regional documentation of we're all together. So what I mean by that is, right now, when the state looks at the school budget, who are they listening to? The district, not the towns. Outside of what Ann Goby's might be able to help us with when we yell at her, asking her to yell at them. And please forgive
Whatever, I got you.
my wording. I'm not trying to say anything negative about anybody there or their efforts. I'm just trying to get at
Volume
the
of their
point
voice?
that, huh?
Or the volume of their voice. Ann she'd be like, that's not yelling. Oh, you wanna see yelling?
That is so true. She would definitely let you know. But what I'm trying to get at is, the school district has no clue if a town's saying, this is gonna be a heavy capital year for me, if you don't tell them in September. So if a town all of a sudden has to replace 3 vehicles and the roof on one of their administrative buildings, and that year is gonna hit their capital budget so hard that they don't have the extra that might line up with the school districts, this is the year we need the extra. It's like, tell them in September really does help them understand that this town is gonna have an issue even with our normal up.
It helps us.
That's all I mean. It's all about explaining your needs and getting it out there. Again, it's all about planning. If you don't give them a number, what are they gonna do? They're gonna continue to build their budget in a vacuum until they built their budget, and then we built our budget, and then they mesh, but they don't mesh. Why get to the point of, we've already built our budgets, now someone's gotta adjust, and they gotta look at all the other accounts they have to modify to adjust that one line item because we didn't mention it 2 months earlier.
I think though at that time, if we're keeping up with our 5-year plans, and we have especially our capital plans sketched out for 5 years, those don't always go according to plan. But after July 1st, when we start the new fiscal year, we'll know at least what we did meet on our capital plan and how our capital plan is being revised for next year. And as far as that goes, that's probably the only preliminary thing we're gonna bring out 2.5 months into the fiscal year for this budget process. So we might have something really, really preliminary, but it's hard to have any of the real numbers. Like, we talked about having a special town meeting, and said, well, there's nothing we need to do yet. We put it off to see if something comes up, because we still don't know if something's gonna come up that needs some money.
Well, one thing we could
And-
know
and-
of is
but-
union negotiations
Right.
might be coming the next
But
fiscal year.
I could see having a preliminary meeting if we do it in September, but it's gotta be real basic, like, okay, here's where our capital plans fell, and here's where it laid out, and here's what we need to do next year because of this year.
Yeah.
Or maybe we got something out of the way and we got it easy. And so, yes, that discussion to that end could happen in September, but I can't
Right.
see anything
But a
much
town could
more
also bring up,
productive.
this is my year for assessment. So I know that's gonna hit my line item differently than the other four
And
towns.
we need to already have planned that and be fiscally responsible in how we do our own capital plan, knowing our assessment might be coming up and our school bike might be bigger that year. So it's on us too, as towns.
And if we have a
without
5-year plan,
But the
by-
meeting helps all of us plan that
Yeah.
way.
I think we should ask the school again for at least a 3-year plan. They should have some sort of plan, capital plan. They should be planning for roofs or repairs or major things a few years out. They should have an idea, and they should be able to give
They
us an
presented
idea.
a few things before. I've seen the plan, but
So I guess the basis of it is that any assessment that goes above 5% to any one town is a reduction in is going to result in a reduction in service or go to an override to maintain that same level. Because if their budget is half of ours, we can only levy 2.5%. So 2.5% to 5 is, so if they're asking any town to pay any more than 5% of an assessment, they're asking them to cut the services to their town.
Well, they are at that point anyways, because if they're 60% of a town's budget,
Right.
then a
But-
5%
But what
increase
he's saying
represents.
is,
5%.
even by a 5% increase, they go from 60% to 62.5% every year, then 65%, then
So the-
because the math just says that percentage. Now, I did it very basically. I'm sure if you really got into the math, I'm off a little bit, but
But
the
no,
concept
that's
is
true,
there.
because we're looking at projections, and if things continue the way they go, we're not gonna have any money for anything other than the schools.
So one thing,
Basically.
I met, I was the only one there, not the only one there, that was the only select board member, FinCom member out of the 5 towns I can't remember when it was, during the process of the between 8.55% and 6.1 that it ended up with, somewhere in that timeframe. And I actually had, sort of, when they allowed me to speak, which took a little bit of much, more than it should have, but it took me a while to actually speak at the meeting, sort of said my piece, sort of said some of this stuff and whatnot. And after the meeting, because the district, which they'll tell you, they only went up 1.8% from the previous year last year. It just sort of worked out based on how they had insurances and whatnot. So it wasn't, and people outside were like, man, that sucks for you guys, but we only went up 1.8. And I said, I know, so it's.
What did we go up? I forget.
Ours was about, I think it was in the range of 3.
But there was negatives.
But that's my point.
But, I mean, here's what I was
The
gonna
two
say.
major contributors, Hubbardston and Barre, went up more than the average account across any of the other accounts in those towns.
What I was saying before, the percentages wise, if we use $100, a 2.5% increase on $100 means the town will get an extra $2.50. If the school is 60% of your budget, they're getting $60. A 5% increase is $3. So at a 5% increase, they already take 20% more than we have. So really a 4% increase pretty much taps out our budgets. A 4% increase would be $2.40. That would leave an extra 10 cents for the rest of the town.
That's where you guys were.
But I'm saying that's,
These guys were doing that.
and that's what I tried to say before, because the state doesn't pick up their share of this, the town gets double. So when the school goes up by 2.5 or 3% increase, we hit 5 or 6%. And that goes beyond our 2.5 cap. And if we have to keep asking for overrides, we're not really doing what the 2.5 law is supposed to do.
So we're over forever.
And we can't keep cutting, this is what I said to school, we can't keep giving you a higher percentage of our budget. We can't keep running our town buildings and everything on 40%. And what they said to me is, well, we have more employees than your town. You might, but you don't have more employees in the 5 towns.
Yeah.
Then you don't have more buildings in the 5 towns, and you don't have more equipment in the 5 towns. In fact, the towns of 5 towns combined probably have 50% more stuff than the school, but the school gets 50% more money. The,
And the
you
number
know,
of students keeps going down.
there's certain expenses to
Just
keep the school
to
afloat.
clarify,
and
my
things.
real position here has nothing to do with the state formula. It's the fact that the state takes more revenue from
Yes.
local towns, even in,
Than they give.
for example, marijuana tax. Who's getting the money? 22% to the state, maybe 3% if you're lucky to the local.
Yeah.
But if you were the local that approved it, wouldn't you prefer the 22% and give the state 3%?
And shouldn't the state
Because
share
what's
those
the state
revenues
really
with
doing
towns?
other than having an office so they can say yes or no to the application? The truth is, the 22% is not needed for the overhead they need to administer this. It's a revenue grab.
To give to the schools? No.
Well, I'll tell you
no,
what, if it
to
goes
give
to the
inside
schools,
95.
if it goes to the
To give
schools
to
and
the
they,
East
and they
Coast.
start funding these unfunded mandates, it would bring our shares
It
down.
would, no doubt.
I mean, if they started paying their fair share of the schools, we drop from 60% of our budget to 50% of our budget, that'd be the holy grail, then things would work.
I'm just suggesting that there's a couple things here, and most of the biggest frustration I have right now is our system continues to work the way it does. And what I mean by that is those that have, make sure that those that don't fight each other.
Sure.
So the school district doesn't have money. Well, fight the towns in your district rather than the state that has it. And that works the same way to the federal level. So the federal's fighting the poor state versus the rich state. It's all a breakdown to the fact that the biggest benefit I see of the 5 towns coming together is consistently documenting the voice and our position in regard to how the state funds local services.
Agreed. We, and let me just add to that a little bit. So we were the first, part of the original sort of task force collaboration, when we all got together, all 5 towns to do this. We were, of the community compact grants, all of the towns then had to change their primary you have to check off a few boxes on which departments you want to go through, moved into education so that we got a collective, which came through Hubbardston because we were the mechanism at that time, the original $100,000 grant, which then was another $70,000. That was the first one the Polito administration had seen. They heard it. So they commended the fact that the 5 towns got together to do something. You know, again, it was what it was at the time, it was the task force and whatever. But I think that there's some effectiveness just overall in doing that. I mean, more than anything, we're just trying to find, provide an early collective voice that you just can't ignore. So.
I think this is a good idea. Any additional rapport between the towns and the school committee members and
Yeah.
between all of these parties and the state perhaps? It just strengthens all of our hands and hopefully just, at the very least, just makes communication easier.
And then, as Matt
Greases
was
the
saying
wheels.
before, and then maybe feeds off into other sort of shared services stuff, which we can all use.
It's almost
all
like
day
each
long.
quarter could be, this is when we deal with this type of stuff.
Sure.
And then the next quarter is when we deal with that type of stuff. And, I mean, I got a feeling over time, a routine would easily fit where we're all kind of, and right now we're talking the 5 towns, the school district, but we have talked about, at least during certain quarters, well, why wouldn't we invite Petersham? They're part of our building inspector
Right.
agreement that we have, or, so, selfishly, from Barry's perspective,
Yeah,
I
we
would
are.
look at it and say, every town that touches our border is part of this group, which makes it more like a 6-7 town, depending on how you look at Phillipston and Templeton.
Sure.
They're close, but they're not necessarily, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't benefit for certain different agreements. You may find that between Hubbardston, Templeton, Phillipston, and
Rutland.
Northeast Barre and Rutland, we can have something that works all together.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm kind of on this. Again, each quarter would have its own topic, so each town would determine whether that's a topic worth. So if we determine September is kind of that first, let's all get together and figure out how we want to try to mold our joint school district budgeting, or at least present kind of like the basis.
Capital and assessment plan,
Right.
that's all.
That's it.
Then, of course, maybe only those 5 towns show up. But then when we get into the next one, that might be, April or May, maybe that's the next time you kind of look at it, say, all right, this would be a different type of agenda items. So I just think we really can grow with this, and I really like the idea. I know we've been talking about it for a few years, and we've also been really busy. What I mean by is through that whole QEMP and everything from that, it's really been talked about for a few years.
Yep.
These regional meetings that doesn't need CMRPC to coordinate it for us. I mean, I think the end goal of the whole QEMP was for us to continue it on our own. I think there was another program that was recently like that we did continue on our own. They helped start it, but then we started.
The economic development.
Which is part of.
Well, yeah,
Right.
so that was another branch of that whole
There were 4 or
aspect.
5 branches, right?
So that's all
Yep.
I think this is the next
The
step,
next
and I
step.
think it would help. But then I also have a certain point where I don't want to get lost in this from my perspective. I understand the concept of efficiency, and thus, from the State House, they look this way and they think regionalization because it's efficient. There's less people per square mile, therefore we've got to figure out how to make them all work together because we only can give so much money per body. I understand the whole concept. I know why that's there. But you can't let yourself get labeled as that small town, regionalized town, that's the only way you can operate. I think at times we have to be willing to raise our voice back to them and say, this isn't a per capita issue. This is an issue where you could almost call it like the homeless in a city. You can't ignore them and assume they still aren't going to cost you money. You have to find the right programs to help them build themselves up. And right now, I don't see a lot of economic development being pushed away from the major metropolises. And when you keep pushing it into the metropolis, people keep moving to the metropolis, and your per capita ratio perpetuates the funding to the larger communities and reduces the funding to the smaller communities. And so what you're doing is you're making the problem worse. And until we can find a way to look at that differently, and I think we need the towns to work together on that, we need to find out how we can help them promote investment outside of those major metropolises so they don't have to look at it as, how are we going to deal with that in 5 years? Because they're just going to get smaller. Can we actually afford roads for only 4 people in a town? Can we actually afford? Well, that's going to be like that if you don't find a way to get people to want to live there and work there. And that's my opinion. And I think that's been the hardest. It's hard for anybody at the State House. I'm not saying that this is an easy problem I'm kind of throwing out there. But I don't think if you keep looking at it the way we traditionally have, you're ever going to fix the problem. And so we need to, this is where I think this platform, the 5 towns together, if anybody agrees with me, we can kind of build on and try to continue to push that. You've got to make a big investment to a small population to get them out of the hole, not trickle feed them.
Crumbs.
And that's what I feel is going on, is we're getting trickle fed.
So what are you guys looking for tonight?
Nothing. This is, unless you are, Chuck, I just the conversation and basically, the nods that, okay, cool, this is all in early sort of draft form, understanding the concept and sort of feeling a little bit of energy sort of into it, and then, as I said before, we're just gonna, or I'm specifically gonna continue on trying to do the same sort of thing throughout the other towns, and then ultimately get to a point, probably in parallel with maybe a first meeting that's being set up, but meeting a collective meeting, but still doing the same sort of thing. It's so much easier to get so much more across and effective wise to be face to face with you guys. To do the same thing with Hardwick and New Braintree, and then to do what I said before, which is just sort of write up a summary of it all and let people comment. And that may it may flush out that, maybe September's not the right time, right? So that's the time on that sort of report to comment on that and be like, it doesn't make sense then. So maybe you're right then, right? So
Well,
that's
it can get at least a capital side out and give an idea if we have
Right.
something unexpected. So you know early on after ATMs if something unexpected has occurred
Yep.
at that town meeting and if you might need something different. But other than that, I can't see it doing much at that point, other than a shout out for something like that.
What it comes down to me is, we gotta be early enough so that they hear something they can actually act on.
Yeah.
So.
But it's gonna be effective, it's gonna be meaningful, and I just
Well,
don't think there's.
yeah, but a 5-year capital plan, you're
Yeah.
still projecting 4 years out. So if you can project 4 years out, you should be able to project what's gonna happen in 6 months.
And we can say, okay, we're.
I'm just saying,
a
a
2-year
little bit
COLA
more
for
reliably.
employees. I mean, there's more than just that singular parameter, right? We can expand upon that.
Yeah, but I'm saying, we can get something on September, I agree, but I'm just saying, I just don't think we too in-depth, I don't wanna try to get too in-depth in September, is all I'm saying.
Well, look at, and this is another thing that'll come up, is say that for some of us, you end up with a host community agreement. Budget's looking pretty good for some reason for 5 years. All of a sudden, the income's gone. There's no more income in 5 years because the state says, nope, you only got 5 years. It's just so you can figure out how to adjust your own town to deal with the issue, and it's over. You get no more special revenue. You just get your 3%. Okay, well, now a town's saying, well, just in September, you're like, we're gonna lose 2% of our revenue. So, school committee, please plan on that. We are going to significantly drop, or when the landfill tipping fees disappeared on the town, was there any time to tell the school, hey, you see that? We're gonna be down to 60% of our previous revenue. You know, I mean, I'm just saying, those are the type of things where people's revenues might not even be consistent.
Yep.
And so, maybe you get lucky and it goes up.
And my thing just goes to that, they, and I don't mean they like it's adversarial, I just mean that you can't unknow it once you've heard it.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? If you haven't started the process yet of budgeting and you've already heard some stuff, you've heard it. Simple as that. So it's harder it's just a lot harder to ignore. So if we've, especially doing it all together, maybe there's some power in that.
And the other benefit for us is at that September meeting, not only do we get to present our opinion to the school committee or our situation, we do the same with all the other towns. And maybe we're the town that's hurting that year. And one of the other towns says, well, you know what? Maybe a mutual agreement on these other services, we get another regional agreement to help with that. It helps move money to help cover the school budget, or it helps, in other words, yeah, we know we're gonna have this issue, and all of a sudden, kind of like what Hardwick did on our, again, building inspector agreement, nobody expected it, but they got a grant for an electric car that helped us get the inspectors around for a while. And we worked through that, eventually we revised the agreement, but in the first year of the agreement, they kind of just offered to help out, because we didn't have the money to buy a new truck, or whatever. So I'm just saying that September meeting is also maybe another place where one town can say, here's a need I have, and another town can be like, and that helps the discussion in the budgeting, where all of a sudden, various finance committee members say, and we can't afford that, but I do remember that town saying that might be something they could help with. That's all I mean. So I think September could be more than just, hey, school committee, here's our budget. It's, here's our deficient areas in the budget. And then everybody goes, hey, I have the same problem, or that's all.
Then we can make adjustments. September doesn't work, October, whatever.
And I agree with that, though.
So,
You know, we'll find the right time
Well,
of
at
year.
least
The thing is, we have to start someplace. So Dan's initiating it, I'm certainly on board with it. Sounds like you are too. Let's get it on the calendar, and I'm sure the other towns would be amazed if they don't agree to it.
And when we did ask things to the school committee last year, they did come in and present a better breakdown of the budget. They did have a discussion about it. It didn't move things much for what we're hoping financially, but I think they started to listen as well. I don't think they really had the concept of the difficulty it was making for the towns until last year. So I'm hoping that they'll continue on that approach to listening to us more and being more cooperative. And I'm optimistic. I mean, they did come in with quite a they call it demonstration. So the slideshow, they had everything done for the budget. They broke
I
their
think they
budget
did a
down
good
lot
job
more.
trying to educate us on understanding the
But-
box they have to work in.
Right, it was, right, it wasn't to try to work numbers down with us, but to show us why they're stuck where they are. They didn't seem open to our suggestions of things they might want to do differently, and we weren't trying to tell them that. We were just trying to say that 60% is, that's too much, and we can't tell them how to cut it back, and I think that's the first time they've really had someone tell them 60% is too much. It really is.
The only other thing I
And,
can suggest, and this comes from anybody that takes a certain elected position. So it doesn't matter if you're the Board of Selectmen. So technically, we approve policy, the policies, but that doesn't mean once it's approved, we ignore it. Part of our job is also to ensure the policy is followed. So I think even as a school committee, a lot of times somebody says, superintendent builds his budget, presents the budget, the school committee reviews it, breaks it into subcommittees if necessary, makes preliminary votes, and then they approve a budget finally. They can request how detailed that budget needs to be submitted. They can get involved a little bit more with this is what I think the superintendent should be doing type discussions. I understand that the district agreement, as well as state law and other things, kind of define whose roles who and how far you can get in. In other words, I think they can, like the school committee hires a superintendent and the school nurse, I guess. It's like, and everything else is hired by the superintendent. So there's very little influence the school committee has on everybody below the superintendent. Outside of the fact that the school committee can look at the superintendent and say, this is our goal. And you start, just like anybody that you have a job. Andrew, fill out your performance evaluation, give us goals, we'll give you goals, we'll all agree on goals, and then did you meet your goals? Same concept. Is the superintendent meeting goals? So, if the school committee really wanted to have a little bit more input on how the budgets are built and represent the town's needs as a bigger picture, like Greg was saying, versus just how do we get the most for the kids? And the reason I say that is, that's the superintendent's job. How do we get the most for the school, and how do we, and they gotta sell the school committee on it. The school committee represents the towns, and it's their job to explain to the superintendent the balance. That's my opinion. But everybody has their own opinion about their position and how they're elected. But my opinion is the school committee member's job is to say, are you following the school policies, the district agreement? Are you doing this? Are you following the school committee's voted, approved goals? In other words, can you reduce your labor rate? Can you find a cheaper but just as capable insurance program? Or where can you cut is the idea without necessarily having to cut the service. If that's not happening, you can focus on it. Get back to them. Provide me a report. Explain to me. What is the school committee doing that? I don't know. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they're not doing it. I'm just saying that I have heard certain people believe that that's not the job of the school committee. And I just personally disagree. But I've got enough going on in my own world with being on the select board, and I'm sure you feel that way sometimes, is you can only be so many, and we were not elected the school committee representatives. So there is a part where the town does need to make sure that their school committee representatives understand what the town expects them to do. And I only bring that up again because every time that the school budget comes on our table, it's like, I do try to let the town, because we're on camera, remember, you have somebody you voted into this position, and if you don't disagree with how they're managing their budget, you need to express that. So, because I don't care what we say, it really doesn't go very far if the school committee doesn't feel that the town agrees with us. So, it's a bigger picture, but I just have my caveats I throw out there every time we talk about school budget. Anybody else have anything on this?
Don't.
I would say thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for
I know
coming.
you've attempted to schedule this a few times, and I'm glad we were finally able to make it happen. And so where are we at? New Braintree's trying to schedule it?
Yeah,
Or are
New
you gonna go
Braintree's.
to them and
I'm
say
gonna ask-
what we asked them to?
I'll send a follow-up and just say that we had this discussion, we want to look for something beginning in June.
And then in January, we should all be able to give some budget numbers at that point, I think.
Yep.
We should be, well, and you should be into the process, right, getting preliminaries to the department heads by then.
And just to reiterate again, I know I just said it 10 minutes ago, whatever, but I'm still gonna try to do, I'll let you guys know what's going on, I'll just send it to Andrew or whatever as far as what the plan, but I think this is beneficial to be sort of face-to-face. So I'm still gonna try to do that with the other two towns, and try to have the exact same conversation, so that everyone sort of feels like they've got the same information, going into, whatever it is we go into next.
And I appreciate that, because it does help. You know, we may have not had the same push to just set a date. We've talked, again, till you pretty much said, let's get on their agenda. We didn't say, let's make it happen.
Mhm.
We just waited for it to happen. Not to say it wasn't happening again.
Gotcha.
Like you said, New Braintree was. So,
Right, we've
I just
had
know when
the-
I speak, somebody might mistake my lack of knowledge for actually things not happening, and that's not what I'm trying to say.
We've had the discussion about the five towns meeting, and I think we've had a board vote that we agreed to do it a couple times in the past, but it's just, we weren't setting up, I wasn't clear who was setting up, and it hasn't happened. But we've always been in support of it, and look forward to it.
So thank you
All right.
very much, Dan. I
Sounds
really
good.
appreciate
Yeah,
it.
appreciate it, man. All right.
Thanks again, Chuck.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank
You too.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you. You too, dude.
Thanks. Oh, you got it, almost.
Drive safely. Cold.
It stayed on.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, motion to adjourn? Just
We're
kidding.
really close, we're really close to that. Just so you know, we addressed all the other new business already before you got here.
Okay.
It was mostly the administrative type stuff.
So the wage authorizations, all that stuff's done?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So we have
Minutes or no?
two items. We have minutes. Well, we have potentially three items.
A letter from Royalston.
Let me,
Give you a motion in
need
a
to
minute if
take-
you want.
I need a,
Sure.
just walk out for 2 minutes. If you guys want to talk about anything, you take the table, Greg, I'll be right back.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Sam.
Want to move in the minutes?
Yeah. Have you gotten the chance to take a peek at them at all?
I did, I read them, I read through them. He said we could
Yeah.
take the
Good.
table, so we can do that.
Good, well, I move that we accept the meeting minutes of Monday, November 18th, Thursday, November 21st, and Thursday, December 5th, as written.
I'll second that motion. In favor?
Aye.
Aye. There you go. I'm done.
See how easy it is when that leaves?
That's,
Strike that.
I'm glad I missed that long discussion, I think. And you guys have already done the town property, and you've already done the wage authorizations?
That's right.
All done?
Yeah.
Love it. I studied up on those for nothing. And the tax rate you've gone over, or that's just?
That's just for
That's
your
just for,
notice.
this we have it, going down the rate, actually, huh?
Yep.
Now,
We have
question,
this letter from the town of Royalston Select Board to,
was he gonna address that, is that what he's leaving for, or is that?
I am not sure.
No,
Okay,
I
why
But I didn't know if. yeah,
don't you
as
go
the-
ahead and read it?
Yeah, as we should maybe just have it be on the record here.
Absolutely. I usually read through
Okay,
with
so
you,
this is a letter addressed to Andrew here, Town Administrator, November 21st, 2019. It's a letter addressed to Senators Comerford and Goby and Representatives Whips and Berthium from the Town of Royalston Select Board. Dear aforementioned senators and representatives, While the nor'easter of October 17th caused great damage across the state, it did not rise to the level of a state emergency. As you know, however, the towns of Royalston, Warwick, Orange, Athol, Phillipston, Petersham, and Barre here in central Massachusetts were hit much harder than other communities by what the National Weather Service labeled a, quote, cyclone bomb. We declared a state of emergency on October 17 and remained in that state until October 20. All but one of the other towns did likewise. Here is an account of what happened in Royalston, reported by our emergency management director in the community newsletter. Quote, it was an all-time record breaker with a drop in air pressure of 30 millibars in just 15 hours. Gusty winds reached hurricane force, ripping the roots of centuries-old trees out of the wet ground and caught drenched leaves on tree branches, which caused trees and branches to take down utility wires for about 2/3 of Royalston's residents. At least a dozen roads were completely impassable during the height of the storm. Many residents were stranded. Route 32 was completely closed for several days, unquote. The story is similar in the other communities. This damage did not just cause inconvenience, it also caused considerable expense, primarily in overtime for DPW employees and the need for an unprecedented number of hours in police and fire department responses. In Royalston, the tab was $23,358, and the other towns suffered similar hits. They are compiling their data. All these towns live close to the belt. This is a big hit, which fell even before the snow and ice season gets here, poses a real threat to our annual budgets. That is why we are turning to you. Are there any mechanisms on the state level to provide some relief to our towns, perhaps by declaring a limited geographic emergency? Any help you can offer us would indeed be much appreciated. Yours truly, Christine Long, Royalston Select Board. So that was forwarded to us, as well as the administrations of Warwick, Orange, Athol, Phillipston, Petersham, and Barre.
I would think that maybe we ought to make a similar response, or at least some note to the same representatives that we concur with the Royalston Select Board on this. And maybe if we get a number first to add our number to it, and then forward our letter as well.
I'd favor that.
And then we'd also send it to these other towns, and maybe they'll pick up suit and do the same thing, and when they realize that. I don't think people realize how bad we get hit out here. I mean, I went to other towns, I couldn't believe there was nothing in other towns. I mean, nothing.
Yeah, I went through Royalston a few times during that week because I have family there, and it was a war zone up there.
Yeah, we don't know if you know how many times, we lost like 7 roads in town within minutes. They're just gone. Unbelievable. It was.
I think that was the week I lost power.
Yeah.
Twice.
Yeah.
Or 3
Monday
times.
and
3 times.
Wednesday.
I don't remember if I got 3 or 4,
Yeah.
3 times or 4 times.
And then another wind winds came up, more of those trees that had fallen over, tipped the rest of the way over and took out new poles later on again. That's what kind of happened during the week.
Was that Valley Road that
Yeah,
had that
Valley-
tree that did
Valley
that
Road.
twice?
Yeah, Valley Road had one, and I'm not gonna get the name, but there's a couple of those that happened after the fact.
Did a telephone pole, maybe it was in Petersham, blow over and hit somebody's car?
I didn't hear
Pleasant
about
Street, I
that one.
think?
I didn't hear
Or
about that.
East Street?
I remember.
Somebody's car as
something
they
on
were
the
driving
news, I
down,
thought, yeah,
driving down the road.
It was,
Yeah.
I just laying in bed and I'm hearing the wind getting stronger and stronger, and then it sounded, like they say a tornado, it sounded like a freight train. Like, wow, I've never heard the wind sustained like this. Then the tone started going off, and everybody responding to calls was calling, and more trees down and more roads blocked, and people couldn't get out with trucks, and the trucks couldn't get to the first call. We had, 4 or 5 different scenes set up in half an hour.
Mr. Chair, would you entertain a motion to draft a similar letter?
When we
Or
have a number
to
throw in.
look into it?
I would make a motion that we identify the cost to our town and the impact to our town, draft it into a letter and submit it either with or separately at the same time as Royalston's letter.
I think Royalston's already went in, so we'll have to follow up.
Or I thought they wanted us to
And
do anything with that in them.
CC the other
Yeah.
town select boards as well?
Yeah, they had reached out initially to as to whether or not to include us on their letter and if we had any preliminary
Oh.
numbers. So I indicated at that time that, yeah, we did have significant impacts, so to include us, but we still have to tabulate the final numbers on it.
I think we should mimic their concept then, and also reach out to the other towns and see if they also would do the same, and then, I'm not saying copy
I know
and paste
Athol-
their letter, but,
I know Athol did already, so.
okay.
I'd second the motion.
Oh, yeah, that's back to me now. Any further question? Call for vote.
Aye.
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 Did you discuss the Montechusett Vocational Technical School
We did not.
rebate?
So the treasurer is presenting us a deduction in the budget number for Montechusett. How does that affect our budget now that it's at this point, since we just had taxes?
I mean, we're still levying the full 443,000.
So that'll be free cash?
Well, it'll be a surplus in the end of year budget.
For us though,
But
right?
Stay warm out there.
Yeah, yeah, unless we went back, we would have had to go back to town meeting prior to the setting of the tax rate to reduce the overall budget by that $3,000 in order to have any impact on the tax rate.
But if we wanted, and the finance committee agreed that 3,000 to be transferred to another line item.
Correct.
Okay.
You could do that at any time after May 1st anyway.
Right. Well, assuming it's actually a surplus. I mean, you wouldn't do that if the assessment didn't change it. That's all.
Right, yeah, I mean, basically any surplus that you have in the budget after May 1st, you can unilaterally move that around without having to go back to town meeting.
And the reason I ask, and I think it was a little bit earlier in the year, maybe it was November-ish, this happened with the school district.
Right.
But it happened early enough where we're not allowed to consider that free cash. We couldn't, I'm trying to remember, it changed
So-
something where we couldn't use that as a buffer for other things.
We can't move it in, it's basically, we couldn't just grab that right now and move it over to, say, like highway operations or something along those lines.
It was almost something like the
But-
schools got to keep it and it became their
The
excess
school
and
doesn't, no, it
deficiency,
doesn't,
not us.
it doesn't become the schools, because it's an assessment, it's budgeted for assessments. They don't now get to keep that on top of everything else and see that as a windfall. That'll just go as a surplus at the end of your budget and roll back to free cash the next year unless it was transferred to another
Unless we
account.
reuse.
And I believe
we have
you
to
can
make.
do that after May 1st. I don't think it's precluded. I just know there's some language that you couldn't take it out of a school's budget itself to move it over. So I think it's more, the wording is more tailored toward school, towns
Only-
with their own schools, that you can't take money that was already given to the school and move that into the town's account. You have, because it's an assessment, you're only gonna pay as much as your assessment costs. You could take that money that's not being used for the assessment and move it out.
Okay.
Well, when it comes down to plowing overtime and sanding monies in the springtime, maybe we'll have some there without hitting free cash for it.
Yeah, you could do that.
I got you.
And you
Because
could
that's
put that
always,
money at town
that's,
meeting.
yeah, that's deficit funded intentionally, so we're always gonna have something. If we don't have a hit, then we're in trouble, because then we're gonna have a stockpile of sand and salt somewhere, too much to get rid of, but, I'm sure we'll use it.
Okay. Did we go through meeting minutes?
We did.
Yes, they're gone.
Okay. Have we, you guys ready to look at any of these financial policies, special events bylaw, economic development plan review?
Special events bylaw, if we've had no change in it, we like the draft we had. We're waiting to see if anybody had any input or change. So if there isn't any, I don't see reason to address it again, because
All right.
we were just kind of keeping it on there until, we were saying that'd be an annual town meeting thing, so until we get to, say, May, we don't have to really.
Oh, no,
publicize the
I really
draft.
want to get into more of discussion so that people out there know what we might be presenting, and if they have anything, we can revise it.
Then maybe we get back to it in April and start
So-
more discussion.
What I would like to do is at the next meeting, plan on it, going through it.
Just going through it again.
Yeah, only because we've walked some of these special event permit processes recently that have brought to light some questions about where does this really apply? Who does it apply to? And I just really want to get into it again as a body to say, does that make sense, or is that
I don't think we-
overburdensome?
I don't think we read the whole thing on air, so it's only a few pages. We could do that, literally
That's what I'm thinking. We'll take a meeting where we
go through it and then wait for public input again, if we have any. Sure.
So,
Because I think we talked about it, but we didn't really go through it. We said people could review it uptown, but we ought to go through it and have that full discussion, disclosure on air. And then we may have some more input from people. We may not.
agreed. But
Be nice to present at a town meeting, have it ready, have it already talked about, and just have it go through.
that's
without
my
question.
hope, and at least understand if there is any discussion on the floor, why it's there, because we've had enough chance to,
Right.
maybe we're getting some feedback so that we can explain it. I mean, there's a fine line to cross here about defining a special event on private property, and how do you truly define whether that special event requires a permit versus it's just, I mean, if somebody's got 100 acres and they're gonna have 50 people come to their house or 100 people to come to a house for a wedding,
It's none of our business.
that's what you would think. But how do you write a bylaw
Well,
that
that-
applies to all private property?
It has to have an impact on the town. So in other words, the park, when you get to the
Someone
savage
needs
events,
to
they
know if they have to apply.
Right.
So you can't retroactively say, oh, that would have been one where, look at what you did to your neighbor. Because if it's a quiet wedding versus a headbanger's ball wedding, it may have a different effect on their neighbor. And so that's why I'm just trying to say, we gotta be careful how we craft this, because.
This is part of what I asked before when we started with this process 2.5 years ago. What triggers this?
And
And there was no good definition of what triggers it, and there may still not be, but that's part of what we'll talk about and hash out. And I think what triggers it is important, and fee structure is important. If it's gonna be, some sort of set fee to take out the permit, it should be, really, the goal should be to cover our administrative costs on running the permit. It shouldn't be, well, Phil Stevens is gonna have 10,000 guests, so we want $1 per head. Shouldn't be something like that. It's none of our business what someone does like that. It's not the right way to go after a tax. I think the idea, the intent,
It's not a revenue grab, it's
Right.
an administrative, make sure we're safe.
the public's been told the intent of this is to make sure it doesn't interfere with public safety. And this is why we have a sign off from the police and the fire, and make sure the ambulance and fire services and police are all represented. And if they think it doesn't impact the town, then maybe we don't need to have the permit. And that may be the discretion. They check, they apply, anyone could apply for the permit, and Andrew could say needed or not needed, They're not gonna have enough cars. There's gotta be some discretion allowed on our end to say, no, we don't need a permit for that.
And that's something I was thinking, maybe a density of either people per acre or cars per acre.
Well, it's more important
Affects
cars.
it, because
Length of time of the event? Weekend festival versus a,
kind of, but I think it's almost more the
Karaoke party.
density of the moment is more important than the length of time, to a degree.
yeah, of course.
Because if you're in an R20, you only got the half acre or whatever minimum lot size, and you're gonna have 50 people come to an outdoor event, that's a whole different story than if you're bringing 100 people to a 100-acre lot out in an R80, and they're 3,000 feet from the closest neighbor.
Not necessarily.
Part of the definition in there,
Well, you
As
could
it's-
have a party in your home with
Right.
50 people, and
I did it every
the
year
neighbor
at
might not
Christmas.
notice one bit.
I did it every year at Christmas. I had 50 to 60 people in my house for Christmas party with my family. No one would know. It's all indoors.
Or you just had neighbors that didn't consider it
We
an
weren't,
issue.
we weren't loud, we didn't have music, and you don't. But if it's a fully private event versus open to public, and that's part of the definition I think that is in there. When it's open to the public, it's very different than if it's just private. And I'd be very leery on trying to put any special permit on any private property for a 100% private event. They're already gonna be expected to park in a proper manner. If the road, when you're parking, everyone knows your right tire has to be 12 inches from the curb or the side of the road. But also, your left side of your car has to be so far from the center line. If the road's not wide enough, there should be no parking on the side of the road. It's up to those people to understand when they're parking illegally or blocking a road. No permit needed for that. It's just, there could be repercussions if people do things that are irresponsible. But I don't want to try to get into something that's overreaching into people's private properties and private affairs and private homes. So if it's not open to the public, or it's not drastically affecting a public way for some reason, or using a public way, I don't think it should be part of this special permit. I really don't like government stepping into someone's private property on a private affair on a private property.
No, I understand that. And that's why I wanted to reread this to
Yeah.
see if any of those thoughts, like,
I'm pretty sure it says that it's going to be
this
public
clause
invited,
opens the door for that. We didn't realize, but now all of a sudden, that's the way you get into everybody's property.
but, yeah.
You know, is this
and-
applies now to everybody because of this one line that we just we read it the way we wanted versus the way it's written, just because we assumed we
I don't like
understood the
government on my
meaning.
property at all, and I sure don't think anybody wants me in there, so.
So, that's all. I really want to just do that as a
Yep.
group. So maybe our next meeting
Do it next year?
is not until
Yeah, I would,
January 6th or something?
I wouldn't take this up till after the end of February or something. March. It's plenty of time to discuss it and get it out before the,
It'd be good to look at it with some fresh eyes too.
let's get past the January and get past this Melton Town meeting before we get into this.
I really would like to try to do it. I'm not looking at the right calendar now. I was gonna say.
Sometime next year.
I would like to at least do it no later than the second week of January. The second meeting of January.
That would be
Um,
21st. Tuesday the 21st, the day after Martin Luther King Day.
And then at that point, it'll pretty much just, unless we identify things to revise, it'll kind of just sit until. Tuesday the 21st. And I think it'll all come together very soon, why I'm saying.
Oh, yeah, I don't think it's gonna be a big deal. That it's written pretty well now. I don't think we'll have any changes, but there might be some.
With that, I'm not sure if there's anything else on the agenda we need to discuss now, outside of, we've got an executive session we can move into.
I just wanted to say that USDA, so I talked with Hardwick today. They had a conference call with USDA about the sewer application. And they said that what they're gonna be looking for is basically two joint applications, one from Hardwick, one from us, signed by us, with the upgrades to the station that are to the wastewater treatment station that are necessary. Hardwick's
That
consultant.
kind of defeats a regionalized grant.
Well, they'll put together the application, and basically they're just gonna like marry them to say that here's what Barry's needs are, here's what Hardwick's needs are, they're being submitted together. I know that I talked with Tom about this, he wants to meet as the board and sewer commission before taking additional steps in signing it, so.
Maybe a multi-town application makes it easier for them to use grant money for that percentage and denominations they're talking about.
That was at least the position of USDA, was that they wanted to see the
It's just
two.
absolutely in reverse of what we were told to start this. Two separate applications is not a regionalized grant application.
Which is why we'd have to kind of get back together at the table with the sewer commission and probably bring Hardwick in to say, here's here's where we're at, here's the positions.
It's certainly
This is the
possible,
way
too, if-
USDA wants us to move forward.
If grant
on.
money's gonna be
I
spent
guess I
here.
would say okay, but if the USD doesn't completely fund
Right.
our grant application, there is no agreement with us and Hardwick. Done.
Right.
It could be that if they're gonna give grant money to do upgrades in our town, they wanna give that check to us, not to Hardwick. They may prefer to have
Right,
that
but that
side come
means
straight.
we now have to bid it. That means we now have to manage it. Depending on the level of the costs involved,
Well, I think Tom would rather
we
do
not
that
only have to do
anyways.
that, we have to pay someone else as an owner's project manager to watch it. It depends on the level of cost and the type of bidding, so
But I think.
there's a lot to roll into that application funding concept.
Right.
Right,
But
so-
to a point, I think our guys are gonna wanna be in charge of their own upgrades, their own facility, not have someone else in charge of it.
Well, we can still do that just with our agreement between us and Hardwick.
Yeah.
You can do this if you only do what we tell you to do.
So anyway, I'll
And
I'll
it-
get back with them and try
Yeah.
to, I'm sure that the next few weeks are probably gonna be pretty busy, so I'll try to say it right after that new year, because I think that at the end of January is when they wanna have the application in. As long as that works, so those first 2 weeks, I'll try to get something set up between.
Did they get back with the redesign on the things we talked about in our facility yet? 'Cause they were
Yeah, so
gonna
they met
re-engineer that for us.
they met last week. Basically, what they said was that the engineers went over everything. I was down there when they were talking with the engineers. They put a whole scope together, brought that to USDA, and USDA seemed fine with all the proposed upgrades. So, but that was just USDA's input as far as how they wanted to see the application process go. So I guess what we'll do is we'll try to invite our sewer commission in Hardwick, try to get us back together and just say, affirm this is the process that needs to happen, that it's still that preliminary process. It doesn't put us at any
We're gonna have to do
risk.
that early in January if we need to have this done by end of January.
Right.
So we might wanna put that in the agenda for the first meeting in January.
Yeah, well, let me,
Yeah, the minute they're ready, let them know that if they're gonna ask to have a meeting 3 days before the application's done, it's not worth trying.
yeah,
Because I will not get tagged into a bait and switch and make the decision now, let's go to the state and go with it, because it's not even worth it to me.
I'll let them know to get it together as soon as possible, even if it's after Christmas and before New Year.
We're not the
New
ones that
Year's
have any
window
jeopardy
and
here,
track
so it's
that.
not.
Well, that's part of it, but it's also, and don't get me wrong with, I'm not knocking Hardwick or their consultant.
We specifically
But when you take
asked.
that and you tie into the USDA, from what we're hearing, it sounds like the USDA changed how they wanted the application submitted.
Mhm.
To me, it feels like a bait and switch. Here's a program, oh wait, split up the applications. Now the USDA can come in with two separate voices and approach them two separate ways. And to me, if that's the case, the first answer is nope, back out and tell the USDA, this is what you wanted, now you're changing it. I'm not comfortable with your position, I don't trust you.
No harm in putting the application.
And
in
they
see
can
what
go back
say.
to Hardwick and say, you know what, I think we can do this as a regional application like we originally told you to do. Because the USDA, the DEP, the EPA, they all realize they all screwed up Hardwick. This isn't just Hardwick screwed up Hardwick. They let it fester to the point that it's bleeding out into the river.
Mhm.
Don't make it complicated to fix the problem, just fix the problem. And that's my, again, I speak my mind on this. I'm not appreciative of the change
Let's
in
not
direction
panic.
because I don't trust it, that's all.
Let's get the application and see what they do with it.
I'm
and
just
then-
setting my stage,
No.
my line.
I fully understand and agree. That's a discussion we had, that we didn't want this to cost our taxpayers any money, and it won't. And, because otherwise.
It will if it's a separate application, because
Otherwise-
we're gonna have to have matching funds.
Otherwise, we're doing fine as we are.
They won't give us a grant that doesn't require us to contribute something separately. So if they're gonna
Maximum,
hold that,
right.
tell them we're not interested.
The maximum amount that we'd be looking at would be a 75% grant, still financing.
So we'll have to come up with the 25%
Well,
that
and
way.
that depends up to the water
And it's
sewer.
not worth it.
That depends on the water sewer and the enterprise, if they think the upgrades are worth it.
No, because water and sewer cannot enter into an agreement with Hardwick. The Board of Selectmen can.
No, the water sewer can take the grant and agree to fund the upgrades. But that would have to be with us having a contract with them.
I guess what I'm
and
saying
having
is I
revenue
don't
stream.
think the sewer department has a right to enter an agreement with
No, they don't.
the town of Hardwick Sewer Department. I think that has to be at the administrative level between the two towns.
Correct. I'm just saying,
I'm not gonna fight them, like, I don't mean it that way.
I'm saying
just-
for the grant and for the funding, if the sewer department that operates as an enterprise
Thinks they have the
feels that
25% match.
feels that investing that 25% is worth it for the upgrades we're gonna get that are gonna take us 20, 30 years down the road before we have to touch our plan again. If they think that money's worth it, they may wanna proceed that way. That's up to them.
I'd have to listen, you're right.
That's up
I
to
see
them.
what you're saying.
And from that point, it would change the agreement would make with Hardwick. Okay, now we're not gonna charge you the same flat rate as our residents. You're gonna pay a certain percent above until we recover this money. And work it out. There's other
I'll
ways.
listen.
It's not an end all. I'm just
I
saying it's
just
not
don't
an
like
end
the
all.
it
I know.
feels too much
I
like a
don't
bait
like
and
it.
switch
Yes,
with a
it does.
deadline that's too fast. And they're gonna
And we
make us
started
make a
behind the
decision
first
before we even finalize our own capital budget.
Yeah.
Which I think is just a point where it's like, this was a bait and switch.
We'll find out.
To me, no, it's a switch,
It's a switch.
and we were baited.
Wow. I don't know what they're offering yet. That's why I won't jump to it. I don't know. I don't.
All you need to know is, it's
It's a
not
switch.
what they were offering, so it's a switch.
And
And we were interested, so we were
right.
baited.
We're hearing what they said. We don't know if that's truly, if they have switch or if it's just Hardwick got it wrong. We don't know which it is. In any event, it's different. We acknowledge that. We agree with that. But I'm just saying, there certainly is the possibility that our sewer department, the enterprise fund says, hey, if we only gotta pay that, and we're gonna get all this, we're in. I mean, let's face it, we don't know what kind of upgrades we're gonna need. They probably already know what we need in the upcoming years for upgrades and what it's gonna cost us to do those upgrades. These would go above and beyond what we need down there and bring us way down the road. So who knows?
When is
I hear you.
We need
When
the conversation.
Did we just finish paying off, or is this the last year of paying off the previous sewer debt?
We have two active debts, but the large one was paid off this last year.
Last year, they finally paid that off.
That's why
19
we-
was the
that
last,
was
FY
why-
19 was the
And we'll
last year.
dive right back into
Well,
that
no,
debt,
that's
rather
why,
than
that's why we get the.
save
financial
revenues
goal.
for a couple of years and then build it. But that is their budget. They pay attention, they know what they're doing. So I do respect that.
Do we know then when the next sewer commission, when the next time they meet is? Is it every other Tuesday?
I don't think the sewer commission meets twice a month. I think DPW is the second Monday, but I think sewer commission is the second or third week each month, but I can't recall if it's
I seem to think they met.
Tuesday,
I
Thursday.
seem to think they met before the DPW commission.
The next regular is this Thursday.
Okay.
Could we ask them
I
to
guess it is after.
But I think
revisit this and give us some sort of recommendation for how we should proceed? Do you think that?
We gotta get the application in and then decide.
If you're, one of your concerns is it's coming up too fast, then maybe this sewer commission or someone else might be able to shed some light on if it's worth trying to pursue it, or if it needs to just stay on the drawing board, or.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out what boards and commissions do you think have to vote on this? Sewer? Does DPW commission have to have a vote on this?
I wouldn't think so.
Or is it just sewer commission and board of selectmen on their varying roles? Like, we're more the regional agreement, which means we may not even need to make the vote now. Submitting the application may just be a sewer commission decision. Like you said, if there's no commitment, as long as there's no commitment in it, they can make that vote without our opinion.
Right. I don't know if that grant's supposed to come from the town or the sewer. I would think the
I
grant
think they
would
need
come.
I think they need the Board of Selectmen's signature on the application to the USDA.
Okay.
Because, I mean, again, we're not meeting again for 2 weeks.
Mhm.
And then we might not be meeting again after that. Technically, like, it could line up, I'm just saying,
We should
by
try
the
to get
time they
this.
want the application.
assuming that
We should get this in in
they meet by,
January early.
meet on Thursday, they have some sort of information brought to them by then, they can at least have some sort of recommendation that they might be able to discuss with you guys on the 6th.
Let's shoot for that. Early is better. Because the 20th is, that's out there.
We'd like to know whatever they can tell us by the 6th. My understanding is they were gonna be submitting the grant 2-3 weeks ago.
They said before February. It was what their timeline was, because they want, the next
It was February, was that
fiscal year
timeline?
was that,
Okay, maybe I'm
Yeah.
misremembering.
like,
something.
federal fiscal year that kicked in like the second half. Started in February, so they wanted that application first in beginning of the second half.
Yeah, so we're a month and a half behind starting the process, so they gotta run.
They acknowledged it was a tight timeline. So.
What else we got?
Yep, okay. I have nothing to add to the open meeting part. If anybody's got something, fine, otherwise, do we have a motion to go into executive session?
I'll make a motion that we go to executive session. We'll return from executive session just to adjourn.
I'd like to second that motion.
I don't know the clause, so what is the,
Oh.
sorry about that, the reason?
Discussion, or you can read it if you want, just to.
We need a vote.
We'll
I would
vote after
just
the-
revise,
Sure, sure.
executive session, exemption 2 for collective bargaining.
Okay. Non-union personnel order to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. All right. Call for a vote?
Aye?
Aye. All right, we'll turn off cameras, Mr. Degon. We'll close doors and begin our executive session.